Thank you very much. I hope this doesn't stand out as odd, because I work in artificial intelligence. But what I'm going to bring out is a very humble effort over maybe more than a decade to try and accelerate sustainable economics, bring in consciousness, as Gaurang Prabhuji very nicely talked about the Ashtalakshmi, through AI and digital interventions, because whether we like it or not, there are many other termites which are eating up into our system. So we could use AI constructively, and I'm going to probably give you glimpses into what's possible. So what are AI and digital interventions? Why do they have a relevance in boosting culture and economic sustainability? I very briefly touch on this. I'm humbled and also honored to be leading the first in the world government-funded large language model initiative called Bharat Gen, was launched 3 months back. Now, the reason this was launched and the reason the Indian government took this initiative is largely culture preservation, preserving our languages, which भाषाओं में निहित है हमारे बहुत सारे सिद्धांत. आप इंग्लिश में क्या कहते हैं? I broke my hand. वही आप हिंदी में कहेंगे तो मेरा हाथ टूट गया. तो हमारी सारी भारतीय भाषाओं में होने वाली बात बहुत होती है. जैसे भगवद गीता में कृष्ण कहते हैं कि 5 कार्य कर्म होने के लिए 5 एंटिटीज़ हैं, है ना. उसमें अधिष्ठानम तथा कर्ता करणम च पृथक विदम विधा च पृथक चेष्टा दैवम चैवात्र पंचमम. तो हमारी भाषाओं में ये 5 हैं, ये निहित है हमारे व्याकरण में, शब्दकोश में, शब्द व्युत्पत्ति में. तो इसी दृष्टिकोण से ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण इनिशिएटिव आरंभ किया गया. एंड थैंकफुली दिस इज थ्रू अ Section 8 company, which means it should do revenue generation. Economics is important there as well. And envisioning AI for all through public-private partnership. Let me give you a glimpse into what is possible through generative AI. ये हम कृषि साथी करके बनाए, 3 महीना हुआ, तो hopefully you get a small glimpse.
पिताजी, आप चिंतित लग रहे हैं.
खेती के कुछ प्रश्न है बेटा.
पापा, कृषि साथी है ना?
ये क्या है?
ये आपका AI मित्र है जो आपके खेती की स्थिति समझकर उचित समाधान देगा.
मैं मोबाइल में कैसे लिखूं? मुझे इतना तो नहीं आता.
पापा, आप इसे बोलकर भी अपना प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं. पूछिए.
अंगूर के पौधों में रोग और कीट नियंत्रण कैसे करें?
आपका अंगूर का बाग वर्तमान में किस अवस्था में है? प्रारंभिक छटाई, अंकुरण या अंकुर विकास?
प्रारंभिक छटाई.
आप अंगूर कहाँ उगा रहे हैं?
तो ये पूरा डेमो नहीं दिखा होगा, पर आप देख रहे हैं किस प्रकार यदि हम व्यक्ति का संदर्भ समझे तो विषय उसकी वाणी में, उनकी वाणी में स्वीकार करते हुए उनके परिचित किसी वाणी में हम समाधान नहीं कहना चाहता, एक प्रकार का संभाषण छेड़ सकते हैं. ये पानी का विषय हो, कृषि का विषय हो, यदि हम अपने इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम इस प्रकार के AI तंत्र में ले आएँ, आप सोच के देखिए, खुलासा तो होगा, लोग सोचने तो लगेंगे कि विकल्प हैं टू वेस्टर्न सिस्टम्स ऑफ इंटरवेंशन. अभी ये पूरा वीडियो नहीं दिखाऊंगा, आप देखेंगे इसमें ChatGPT क्या दिखता है. आप चाहते हैं तो हमारे वेबसाइट पे चले जाइए, देख सकते हैं ChatGPT क्या उत्तर देता है. ये इस प्रकार की संवाद शैली हमारे यहाँ हमेशा रही है. आप सोच के देखिए, पीढ़ियों से हम इतने सारे स्मृति शास्त्र निर्माण किए हैं. स्मृति शास्त्र निर्माण कैसे हुए? हमने जब पता किया तो तंत्र युक्ति करके हम रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी जो बोलते हैं, IITs में वी टेक अ लॉट ऑफ प्राइड, बट घंटी मूर्ति जी कैन एल्यूमिनेट, राइट. वी हैव सच पावरफुल frameworks of न्याय, तर्क. तंत्र युक्ति was one very important. If you look at any of these, right, Kautilya, Charaka, Sushruta, all of them refer to sometimes 33, sometimes 35 elements of Tantra Yukti. The idea in Tantra Yukti is to create very, very methodical content which is filled with empathy, which understands the context and brings resolutions through alternatives, right? So can we upgrade our discussion methodology to this overall and reflect this in AI? That's what we have tried to do in the example of Krishisathi. And that's how traditional texts were always compiled as research proceedings. Very, very powerful. We have reflected this in Dharma Wiki, which I'll talk about a little later. Now coming back to the Gen AI, please understand that there's been a big mushrooming of these initiatives throughout the world. Well, India has latched on to it, but we have to do it on our terms. Now, what are our terms? ये विषय महत्वपूर्ण है. आप इंटरनेट पे जाएंगे, the scarcity of भारतीय content, right? Less than 1% of data is Hindi and 700 Indic rare languages. और बहुत सारा जो हमारा ज्ञान परंपरा है हमारी भाषाओं में है. So how do you also address this? This is again a very important area which we are addressing in Bharat Gen. हमारी भारतीय भाषाओं में समानता है. शब्दकोश हो, व्याकरण हो, इनफैक्ट इवन फोनेटिक्स, शिक्षा शास्त्र है जो हमारी भारतीय भाषाओं को जोड़ के रखता है. That's how we are doing a lot of the speech technology as well. I will not get into the technology part, but this is key. We need an Bharatiya Gen AI in current world to reflect our knowledge systems, reflect our language, in fact, grow our knowledge content both in text and speech, and so that we also foster India's AI self-sufficiency. And it's important to know that when we say language, language has all these elements. Its culture, its text, script, its history, and a lot of it is multimodal, images and speech as well. Now the what part, right? So it's a little bit of the why motivation. Now the what part is largely, and the what and the how are to actually have data localization. We should not be feeding our data to these Western models. I mean, some people take pride and say, I have built GPTs by feeding data to ChatGPT. I would warn you against that because honestly, our data often goes out and then narratives are built on our languages. There are papers which say Indian languages have gender bias just based on the data collected from us. Is that healthy? Right? So we need, this is also important from national and security and privacy, but very importantly, localized solutions. वो आपने जो उदाहरण देखा, आप अंगूर कहाँ उगा रहे हैं, वो महत्वपूर्ण है. 5 कोस में बदले पानी, 10 कोस पे वाणी. तो localization is very important. Now, the how part a little bit, some of these slides I'm going to run through very quickly to give you a glimpse. Now, one very important thing we have undertaken since maybe more than 1 decade is digitization and of heritage literature, and in fact, even generation. Sometimes heritage literature is available in one language, making it available in many other languages, right? So this is inaccessibility of this large-scale heritage literature across Indian languages laterally. What we have done over the years is build tools so that lakhs of ancient scientific books are digitized, thousands of them are translated using tools such as Udan project that we have built, and in a way that actually also preserves the connectedness among Indian languages. The fact that many of them have Sanskrit-based terms. Because in Sanskrit, there is also the seed of Sanskriti, of Bharatiya solutions. So here's an example of how the Udan project lets you ingest any book. Here you can see some traditional Telugu text with images. You can digitize it. Not only that, you can also post-edit it. You can also render this in multiple Indian languages, right? What is important is we also have integrated very good dictionaries, lexicons, because these lexicons reflect Indian knowledge system. Here's an example. We worked with the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology. This is Professor Girishnath Jha. It's amazing work happening since the time of Dr. Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, but somehow there was a down, and now the current government has taken it up again to actually generate the technical terms in Indian languages. When we do that, we see a lot of Indian knowledge system coming and being revived. For example, if you have a source text, you need to learn differential calculus to understand Fourier series. आप इसे गूगल में दे दीजिए किसी और में, फूरियर की श्रृंखला को समझने के लिए आपको डिफरेंशियल कैलकुलस सीखने की ज़रूरत है. But actually, if you know that you have your own vocabulary, and if you ingest it in an AI mindful manner, फोरियर की श्रृंखला को समझने के लिए आपको विभेदक कैलकुलस, आप देख रहे हैं हमारे पास शब्द है. So this is how very subtly we have been indoctrinated that we don't have the knowledge and we can actually reverse. This is an opportunity and zillions of terms, right? So, and this has been, thankfully widely adopted. I'm happy to say this also has led to very dharmic personalities who have taken it up as a full-time profession, doing jobs, and has been widely adopted. The second example I want to give in terms of tools is Wiki. Now, Wiki is very powerful because it lets you collaborate. Several years back, we embarked on this Dharma Wiki to help document Indian knowledge system. Now, this was joint work with Professor Ashish Pandey, who's not here today. Let's just contrast what Wikipedia has to say about Ayurveda as against Dharma Wiki. So here, if you see on the left-hand side, Wikipedia, it's pseudo-scientific, it's a proto-science, and unscientific or trans-science system. Right? On the right-hand side, Ayurveda cannot be equated with conventional medical science, since the modern medical science deals with diagnosis and management of diseases. So this is important. This is where the Purva Paksha, Uttara Paksha, the components of Tantra Yukti come in. Right? You don't try to equate apples with oranges, because Ayurveda takes a very holistic view. How is this Dharma Wiki Yojakas? While we know that there are a lot of sampradayas who have been documenting their knowledge in their own silos, the effort here, while we approached all those sampradayas, the goal was to actually help unify and present a dharmic point of view. And when we had to do dharmic point of view, DPOV, we realized that, well, Wiki does provide a moderation policy. Wikipedia, unfortunately, has something called neutral point of view. Till date, I have not understood what is neutral point of view. But Dharma point of view, thankfully, we have documented it in great detail. For example, there must be non-translatability. Many traditional words need not be translated into English. You do disservice by translating. Rachana Saushthavam, diligence, consistency, integral unity of Sanatana Dharma, verifiability, parikshanam, you should have the original source, not something rendered through Max Muller, right? And Tantra Yukti Adhar, which I talked about in my second slide, we have amazing systems of rationalization and churning out scientific literature. Let's bring them back full strength, right? So this is how the homepage of dharmawiki.org looks like. You'll find it very, very scholarly done. And who are the contributors? We have academicians, collaborators, institutions, pilgrims have been on it. I'll talk a little bit more about it, traditional scholars, and also several independent researchers have been on it. The structure is, there's a hierarchy associated because there's a lot of knowledge graph. It is not just verbose text in our traditions. And the hierarchy also reflects in the pages. You can have labelings of articles. Again, this is just to flash a lot of value additions through flowcharts, tabulations, and a lot of images and videos, multimodal, references to primary sources, and scholarly discussions. So giving due diligence to us and attribution to scholars. So here's lots of pages which have been created on Indian knowledge systems, for example, on Ashtadasha Vidya Sthanas, on Darshanas, on Puranas, Itihasas, on story and literature, language and linguistics, research methodology, mathematics and astronomy, metals and metallurgy, and so on. The list goes on. This is a representative idea. Since we don't have time, I mean, if you take a positive mental health, a lot of flowcharts, articles which actually bring together the Indian perspective on Western systems and Western, their limitations, and why Indian systems are holistic, right? So presenting all of that. The other last point I want to talk about is when we worked extensively on Dharma Wiki, we realized that temples are a big source of knowledge. The reason every temple had a pond, right? I mean, with due diligence, due respect to the riverman of India, right? I mean, there's so much about temples which reflect in the way they used to respect rivers and water bodies, right? So we had Dr. Pankaj Saxena, who studied two of the temples, Adikeshava Perumal Temple at Mailapur and Veeranarayan Temple. Please go and visit them. Documented extensively for several months on Dharma Wiki. But then we realized, can we use the schema of temples? We have the Sthala Puranam type of architecture, worships, administration, management, stories, folklore, encoded, everything is embodied learning, there's nothing disembodied. कहानियों में आप सब सीख लेते हैं. Festivals, हर कहीं कोई लीला हो गई तो वहाँ पर कुंड बना दिया. क्यों? Right? That's important to bring out. So we have 7 lakh plus temples documented, but of which 15,000 are very rich. 100K plus monthly users, and there's a Temples of India app. So call to everyone to please contribute to this. You can add temples, you can upload photos, you can search for nearby temples. I mean, all kinds of features that you would like, full text features, such as well. So all this knowledge we are also now bringing out through Bharat Gen. I'm going to just conclude with this one last video. Is it okay? So this is also kind of call for participation. This is not mine, as very nicely pointed out. We are just nimitta.
एक परिवर्तनकारी इकोसिस्टम है। भारत जेन का उद्देश्य मल्टीलिंगुअल, मल्टीमोडल, जनरेटिव एआई मॉडल तैयार करना है, जो भारत के संदर्भ में
Can the volume be increased?
भारत जेन की सफलता के लिए भारतीय डेटा का होना आवश्यक है। इसी दिशा में भारत डेटा सागर भारतीय संदर्भ में डेटा संग्रहण की एक महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभा रहा है। जैसे अनेक धाराएं सागर में मिलती हैं, वैसे ही भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा और भारतीय डेटा सेट मिलकर भारत जेन को मजबूती देती है। हम सभी संस्थाओं को भारत डेटा सागर में योगदान करने के लिए और भारत जेन के मॉडल्स का लाभ उठाने के लिए आमंत्रित करते हैं।
Now you'll see examples of how we have used speech models to render.
भारत जेन, भारत का अपना मॉडल, भारत के जन जन के लिए.
Transferring style to a person whom you can
भारत
relate to.
जेन एक परिवर्तनकारी परिसंस्था है. इसमें
You just type it and now it will be rendered in the target person's speech.
भारत जेन एक परिवर्तनकारी परिसंस्था है. इसमें भारत की 22 मुख्य भाषाएं तथा बोलियां अंतर्भूत होंगी.
इस वाक्य को मेरी आवाज में सुनें।
भारत के कोने कोने के सभी लोग सुलभता से इसका उपयोग कर सकते हैं।
कम डेटा युक्त भाषाओं में अच्छे परिणाम के लिए भारत जिन में हम भाषाओं की समानता का उपयोग कर रहे हैं। कम डेटा युक्त भाषाओं में अच्छे परिणाम के लिए भारत जिन में हम भाषाओं के उच्चारण
Small modification is able to render it
उपयोग कर
seamlessly.
रहे हैं।
Thank you. I think this was just to give you a prelude into what Bharat Gen has. The activities include, as I said, technology development, knowledge, exploiting the commonality between Indian languages, but also creating large data sets. It's a request to all organizations, please reach out, we'll work together, co-create not just the data ingestion, but also use cases around the data set. And in that process, innovation entrepreneurship is very much encouraged. We must have Shubha Labh, right? Thank you very much.